Filipinos are limiting their expenses further as prices of widely used goods get higher. While the government is taking measures to lower prices, should workers get relief through higher take-home pay? Today, we have National Wages and Productivity Commission Executive Director Criselda Sy to share her insights on these issues. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon, Mike.
So as you know, inflation has gone up and prices continue to rise for Filipinos, and Filipinos are struggling to cope. Should we be increasing minimum wages, which are currently at 512 pesos in NCR, no? And if so, by how much?
As it is right now, the wage order of the National Capital Region has already reached its anniversary date in October 5. And therefore, the board, in its meeting last Friday, has actually decided to already conduct consultations. So there are actually 2 consultations to be conducted. One is on October 22 for the labor sector, October 24 for the management sector, and then the public hearing will be held on October 26. And then after the public hearing, that's the time that the board will actually make a deliberation as to whether they would increase the minimum wage or not.
Now, my understanding is about 11 regions have already raised.
Yeah, you're correct.
Year,
yeah,
no?
yeah. And by the way, those regions have actually, the anniversary dates of their wage orders have expired. That's why there were decisions really to raise the minimum
ano bang
wage.
expectations for the upcoming meeting?
For the upcoming meeting, of course, the board is bound to look at different criteria in the minimum wage determination. There are 3 major criteria that they have to consider. Number 1 is the needs of workers and their families. And then the second one, of course, is naman the employer's capacity to pay. And of course, also an equally important criteria is the requirements of our economic development.
Are there any outstanding proposals? Ba? Ano ba yung nasa table ngayon na kino-consider niyo?
At this time, there is already a petition from the labor sector to increase the minimum wage, and that is actually what they are actually looking at.
How much are we talking about?
I think that was 350. That's the petition coming from the labor sector. But there are several scenarios that the regional board looks at.
Well, what would you say is a reasonable living wage for a family of 5? Now, I know Ibon Foundation on their website had published an article saying maybe it should be 995 pesos. Your proposal on the table is mga 300 pesos. So what would you say would be?
The 300 pesos is the labor sector proposal.
That's the right, the labor sector proposal.
But I think it really depends on the number or the size of the family. Depende kasi yun doon.
For a family of 5, let's say.
For a family of 5, we do not actually have that computation at this time. But what we're doing in the boards is we are actually adopting a methodology wherein we set the minimum wage a little above the poverty threshold, and then it should not actually reach the average wage, so that there is room for collective bargaining at the firm level. We don't want to crowd out that space, and therefore, that's the reason why the board has a very critical mandate of balancing the interests of labor and management.
Well, looking at the other side naman, so Ibon Foundation and your proposal obviously are targeting a higher minimum wage. Can businesses absorb any sort of increase at this point, given that there are inflation and other costs, input costs have already risen?
Yeah, that's the reason why I was saying earlier that we need to look at the employer's capacity to pay. So that is actually factored in the discussion or deliberation when the board looks in all this. Sabi ko nga kanina, they have to balance all this. The minimum wage setting is really a very difficult and very political yung procedure, and therefore it is really important that our board secretariat is able to provide a very good technical inputs to our board so that they can come up with a decision that would not really impact naman on, of course, on the growth of our enterprises, but at the same time they would actually respond to the needs of our workers.
If any increase in wages may also result in further stroking inflation.
That's correct. Well, no? That's correct. That's why we are closely in touch with the economics unit of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Pilipinas. So we know all this, and all these inputs are factored in the deliberation and in the discussion.
You mentioned a little bit about, obviously you want to be set it above the poverty threshold.
Yeah.
Now, our officially reported poverty incidence is at 21.6% in 2015. I know the current administration is trying to put that down to 14% by 2022. Our recent SWS survey, however, sort of said 52% of the respondents had self-reported as being rated themselves as poor. Clearly, there's some disconnect. Should we possibly be revisiting this poverty threshold? Is it too low?
If you will look, well, it's actually the Philippine Statistical Agency or office that issues the poverty threshold. As it is right now in Metro Manila or in the National Capital Region, it's at about 343 pesos.
Yes,
so
I know,
you have to set the...
Right. But in June, Secretary Pernia had said perhaps a family of 5, a living wage was closer to about 42,000 pesos for a family of 5, or really 21,000 pesos per two earners in a family. I think perhaps, is it something you are considering when you consider this whole minimum
yes, of
wage
course.
raise?
That forms part of the inputs that we have that we consider in the table, on the table for deliberation.
Well,
in fact, we have several simulations. We were already working on that, and we will present it to the board when they do deliberation. Apart from the inputs that they will actually gather from the consultations that they will conduct this coming 22, 24, and then during the public hearing. So lahat yun isasama natin ng board sa kanilang deliberation.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure everybody's looking forward to the results of these consultations. Okay.